Everyone for taking the time out of their busy days and lives to help us with our transportation system plan. This is our 7th meeting that we're holding together. And you're looking at the agenda right now. We'll cover this last month's neighborhood circulation discussion. This month's topic is the regional circulation. And then we'll get feedback on the regional circulation and then talk about next month's sounding board topic, which will be the environmental constraints. I'm going to go ahead and start the PowerPoint presentation. There's the agenda that we just saw. And here's our sounding board schedule. The yellow highlighted, the 118 where we're at. Consensus on feedback for the neighborhood circulation and regional circulation for the topic for this month. And here are the 3 questions we had from last month. Was 1, should we revise the minimum parking requirements for narrow lots to help reduce traffic congestion? 2, should Clark County reestablish a neighborhood traffic management program? If yes, should funding be diverted from capital projects toward neighborhood traffic management? And then 3, as we come to an end of the sounding board topics, are there any topics that you want us to address that hasn't been talked about? And that's when we heard you wanted to learn more about the environmental portion of the plan. So that's what we'll have next month. Here's a summary of the feedback that we heard from last month, 2 months ago. Evaluate amending parking requirements. Consider eliminating parking requirements based on land use types and institute performance-based parking management. Envision parking as a collective rather than on-street and off-street parking separately. Institute a neighborhood traffic management program that responds to residents' concerns and implements solutions. And then the last bullet point is add environmental topic for the sounding board review, which we're going to do for next month. Okay, so this month, our questions for January. We've got 4 questions. The first one, are we fulfilling the county-wide planning policies to coordinate among jurisdictions? And should Clark County revise a street classification system to improve mobility for the 3 user groups, pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles? Number 3, there are obvious differences in the transportation infrastructure between different jurisdictions in Clark County. And then number 4, should the level of service standards be consistent between jurisdictions in all of Clark County? So if you can, try to remember these questions as we go through the PowerPoint presentation, as we'll readdress them again at the end of the presentation. Here's our regional transportation system. We all know that it includes I-5, I-205, and the state routes, SR-14, SR-500, 502, and 503. And we've got local and urban streets, including city streets. And the map highlights state and federal properties that are in the county. So around the borders of the county, basically on the Columbia River and on the eastern and northern borders. So in the southwest corner is the Columbia River Gorge. And well, there was about 6,000 acres east of the city of Washougal that was designated by Congress as part of the Columbia River Gorge Scenic National Area in 1986. And it's now about up to 18,000 acres.
How many acres was that? Excuse me, how many acres was that?
before, you said?
About 8,000 acres now.
For the
Thank you.
Columbia River
For the
Gorge.
Columbia River Gorge. Oh, you're welcome. So the next several slides, we will discuss the policy framework for the regional transportation system. We'll talk about the countywide planning policies, just some background about the countywide planning policies. So the primary purpose of the countywide planning policies is to ensure consistency between comprehensive plans of counties and cities sharing a common border or related regional issues. Another purpose of the countywide planning policies is to facilitate the transformation of local governments in the urban areas, typically through annexation to or incorporation of a city, so that urban governmental services are primarily provided by cities and rural and regional services are provided by the counties. So policy 5.0.1 discusses working with RTC, the Regional Transportation Council, and reducing reliance on single occupancy vehicle transportation. The Regional Transportation Council is the regional planning organization that certifies countywide planning policies, and local comprehensive plans are consistent with the adopted regional transportation plan. RTC also develops and maintains a 6-year regional transportation improvement program that we can talk about later on. And luckily, Linda is here, so if I say anything that's incorrect about RTC, she will gladly join in and correct me. Clark County relies on coordination with multiple levels of government to achieve its transportation goals. This includes the regional government of RTC, Washington State, and the federal government. The matrix that we're looking at shows our alignment of transportation goals. It's important to note that common goals and policies help Clark County compete for state and federal grants. This helps us stretch our local tax revenues to benefit our residents. You can see in this chart our similarities and differences among the levels of government. A major population growth is expected in Clark County and the Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area over the next 20 years. From the previous table, we recognize that additional analysis is needed to efficiently maintain and operate the transportation system. The county's land use policies also improve transportation system goals by guiding urban forms that protect the environment, provide a mix of housing types, concentrate commercial and industrial uses along major roads, leading to efficient, balanced, multimodal regional transportation systems. The route connectivity in the Transportation Improvement Program evaluation criteria and the county transportation goals can be improved by creating a new policy that addresses improvements with reliability for personal travel and freight movement by increasing route choices. We've got more countywide planning policies. So it's important to note that policy 5.0.5 states that county, local municipalities, and MPO, RTPO, which is RTC, to the greatest extent possible, establish consistent roadway standards, level of service standards, and methodologies and functional classification schemes to ensure consistency throughout the region. Countywide planning policies shall work cooperatively to consider the development of transportation corridors for high-capacity transit and adjacent land uses that support such facilities. Policy 5.0.8 emphasizes that the state, county, MPO, RTPO, which is RTC, and local municipalities shall work together to establish a regional transportation system which is planned, balanced, and compatible with planned land use densities. These agencies and local municipalities will work together to ensure coordinated transportation and land use planning to achieve adequate mobility and movement of goods and people. Here is some history about metropolitan planning organizations. They're created by federal law for planning and transportation funds for communities greater than 50,000 people. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1962 outlines RTC's responsibilities for transportation planning expenditures to work cooperatively and comprehensively for urban areas. Mass transit is also a funding requirement for MPOs as established in the 1973 Highway Act and the Urban Mass Transit Act. This slide lists who RTC works with to ensure comprehensive, coordinated, and continuing cooperation with the region. In the following slides, we will discuss the regional transportation system. As previously mentioned, the regional transportation system includes all state transportation facilities and services, including highways, state-owned parks, park and ride lots, local freeways, expressways, principal arterials, high-capacity transit systems, and other transportation facilities, and services like airports, rail facilities, and marine facilities. Clark County is also part of the national highway system that includes the interstate highway system, which is part of the nation's economy, defense, and mobility. This slide shows us the state route mileage in Clark County as of 2022. I won't read all of the route mileage, but you can see we've got all of them listed: I-5, 205, all the way down to SR 503. And we have seen this slide and the next couple of slides. They are included in this slide deck as part of the discussion on regional transportation. In general, the average daily traffic volumes are higher near the periphery of the city of Vancouver limits. Traffic patterns are influenced by development and changes in the roadway network, resulting in a 79% increase of traffic over the past 5 years. The transportation system is also designed to accommodate freight movement. As you can see from this, the map on the right, many of the roads in the urban area are designed to carry freight. So that's a competing interest that we have with moving people and goods in Clark County. Airports are also part of our regional transportation system as they influence our local and regional economic activity. And ports are a vital component to our regional transportation system as they provide delivery of goods and services to our community. So we've got our 3 ports: Port of Vancouver, Port of Camas-Washougal, and Port of Ridgefield. And the Port of Vancouver is the only one that provides commercial waterborne shipping facilities. And this slide shows us the generalized land use patterns that are included in RTC's Regional Transportation Plan. In 2020, the land use patterns are similar to the 2007 patterns that you see in the map. In 2037, Clark County's population is expected to grow to an estimated 577,431 people living in Clark County. Bridge crossings have continued to grow and is expected to continue growing as a result of population growth. Clark County Council recently passed a resolution that directs the study of additional bridge crossings over the Columbia River. So I wanted to add that to this discussion. So that's what transportation planning will work on in the future, is how to address the more bridge crossings. The following
Gary,
slides will discuss.
Sorry, do you want to pause here to switch the interpreters?
Of course.
Okay, you're good.
The following slides will discuss system performance. This slide shows a concurrency standard comparison. From our policy review, we have countywide planning policy 5.0.5. The county, local municipalities, and MPO, RTPO shall, to the greatest extent possible, establish consistent roadway standards, level of service standards, and methodologies and functional classification schemes to ensure consistency throughout the region. We have a range of street segment level of service measures that include volume to capacity ratio, capacity evaluations, concurrency corridor classifications, and level of service standards. And then on the far right of the table, for the most part, the intersection level of service measures are consistent between jurisdictions. We've seen this slide in the previous discussions. In general, the level of service ranges from level A, which is free-flowing vehicle movement, to a level F that represents the road is operating at capacity with regular queues forming and brief stoppages, usually less than 30 miles per hour. This slide shows corridor volume to capacity ratios for 7 corridors using RTC's 2019 congestion monitoring report. Corridor capacity ratio is an indicator of congestion. The higher the ratio, the more traffic congestion a driver is likely to experience. A corridor with capacity ratio above 0.90 is very congested. This slide highlights several high volume corridors. Congestion is studied in several plans. RTC's system management plan, that includes a transportation system management and operations plan, that's updated in 2016 as the Vancouver Area Smart TREC program, the TSMO, the Transportation System Management Operation Plan 2016. That plan builds upon the long and successful track record of the Vancouver Area Smart TREC program by updating the Vast Intelligent Transportation System strategic plan. The congestion monitoring program shows system performance and highlights key intersection segments and bridge volumes. Washington Transportation Plan 2040 highlights potential benefits, risks, and uncertainties from the technological transformation of mobility. The plan highlights additional safety policies that promote transportation efficient communities around automated transportation. The Growth Management Act requires a balance between land use and transportation, resulting in a multi-year financial plan. This plan shows 5 general funding sources: the County Road Fund, the Public Works Trust Fund, the Local Improvement District bonds, traffic impact fees, the state sources that include gas tax, sales tax, and grants, and then federal sources. The 20-year Transportation Capital Facilities Plan is more speculative and is not required to be fully balanced and funded. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to move on to the next slide for a second. Yep, we're going to get into that later on. Just hold my thought. We'll come back to the 20-year capital facility plan in a little bit. I apologize for getting ahead of myself. It's so exciting to talk about. I just want to jump right into it. And I know you guys want to hear about it. So the upcoming legislator session will include a discussion on funding transportation improvements. But for now, what we have on the books, Washington State is looking at 2 potential new revenue sources. One is a road usage charge pilot project. This is a per mile driven charge rather than paying a gas tax. And then number 2 is a coordinated state automated transportation. So it's called CAT for short. And that program focuses on how all methods of transportation work together and share information among independent vehicles, pedestrians, and coordinated transportation systems. So that work includes developing a policy framework considering both community and regional transportation system needs to shape investment priorities, advancing mobility on demand through collaboration and data standardization, creating opportunities for Washington State Department of Transportation partnerships regionally, nationally, with industry, local, and other partners. So there are potential revenue sources in the future. David, did you have a question?
Hi, can you hear my voice okay?
Yes.
Okay, so my question, because I'm curious, maybe you can expand a little bit on that. How does that look like? How does that work? Because it makes sense that if you're paying taxes when you're going to the gas station, you put the gas in and you can see, how much on the meter it says it's costing. That makes sense. So you understand that. How does it look when you're saying how far you go by mile? Can you explain how do they pay taxes for that?
From the research that I've seen through the Washington State Road Usage Charge pilot project is that it would be a similar revenue stream where we're still going to pay about the same amount based on what we're doing as far as gas consumption and road miles driven. So it's still a pilot project. So it's going to be it could be based on, well, the project will be based on how many miles you drive. instead of going to the gas station and paying gas tax on how much gas you put in your vehicle.
To add
Yes, I
on,
understand that.
I don't
Yeah, go
think,
ahead.
sorry, David, sorry to interrupt you. Actually, what it will look like, I don't have an answer as far as if it looks like a taxi cab where you're seeing the dollar signs roll as you move forward. I don't think we locally know exactly what it looks like on your dashboard as one drives.
So
what is that
still-
going to do? Anyway,
So you mean it's still in the stages of figuring out how that's going to work? It's the concept, the idea that they would like to do that.
Correct.
Yes, that's what they'll work on, is trying to figure out how to implement it. So performance measures exist in several plans. Metro coordinates development of their regional transportation plan that includes the Port of Vancouver, RTC, Washington Department of Transportation, and other Clark County governments. Metro is the regional government for the Portland urban area. RTC and Metro coordinate on bi-state transportation decisions. Metro is in the process of updating their regional mobility policy. This updated mobility policy will guide development of regional and local transportation plans and the evaluation of potential impacts of plan amendments and zoning changes on the transportation system. A primary way of measuring vehicle congestion on roads and at intersections, the current mobility policies measure the number of motor vehicles relative to the motor vehicle capacity of a given roadway during peak weekday travel times, currently defined as being from 4 to 6 p.m. So while MAP 21 has replaced the FAST Act and most recently the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, federal legislation continues to have goals of roadway pavement condition, bridge condition, congestion, non-single occupant vehicle travel emissions, traffic safety, and interstate freight movements. Then President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law did not replace MAP 21. It extended MAP 21 into the fiscal years of 2022 to 2026. So the performance measures are still a requirement for federal funding. However, these measures are largely auto-focused and not connected to the broader goals of the transportation system, such as efficiently connecting people to essential opportunities. That is taken from the American Planning Association service memo from March, April 2020.
So Gary, if you don't mind, can we go back to that previous slide?
Yep.
So this is the first slide that we talked about Metro, and just to give you some clarification, we have the Regional Transportation Council, RTC, that coordinates local jurisdictions in Washington State. And there's Metro, which is the regional government for the Portland urbanized area of Oregon. And those two entities, Metro and RTC, work together in order to coordinate transportation on a bi-state basis.
And the way it works is all of our performance measures need to be consistent together. So that's kind of what I wanted to emphasize with Metro and RTC. Why we'd even want to talk about Metro is because we're part of the larger region. So any changes affect each other. This map
is
shows
this just going to be
regional.
for Clark County, or is they're doing this for Washington State?
I'm sorry, what's that?
I said, was that thing that the pilot thing that you guys were talking about, that cat or whatever, is that just for Clark County or is this for Washington State?
It's for Washington State.
Okay.
And this map shows the needed regional mobility improvements that are included in the regional transportation plan. This slide shows the percentage of congested lane miles in the PM peak hour for regional and local facilities.
So with this graph, you can see the amount of congestion that's decreased when the projects are built, and the benefit that they result in congestion.
Coordinating performance measures between RTC, Metro, and WashDOT. RTC's annual Unified Planning Work Program includes coordination activities with Metro. Let's talk a little bit more about the MAP 21, and I apologize for not explaining what a MAP 21 meant. So it was MAP 21 is an acronym. It's for moving ahead for progress in the 21st century. That's why it's called MAP 21. It's a strategic approach to using data on system performance to inform investment decisions based on the idea that making data-driven decisions and using performance measures to track outcomes can better ensure that projects and investments are delivering the desired results. There's no one-size-fits-all performance measures that can address all the policies or objectives of a plan or project. Many performance measures address only one dimension of a problem while ignoring other important considerations. For example, a ratio or percentage-based performance measure such as volume to capacity ratio by itself does not indicate the number of users affected. So two roadways, one with a high volume and one with a low volume, may both have the same volume to capacity ratio, but the high volume roadway affects more users than the low volume roadway. Multiple performance measures are typically needed. So, Washington state law includes the following 6 policy goals: preservation, safety, stewardship, mobility, economic vitality, and environment. The Oregon Department of Transportation has a requirement for jurisdictions to have a transportation system plans. Washington State does not have a requirement for transportation system plans. We have our Growth Management Act that has a transportation element inside a comprehensive plan. So what we're proposing to do, we've talked about, is creating a transportation system plan to put all of our transportation plans into one local area. And now we're going to talk about transportation performance. So this slide shows performance measures as a general guide to aid in the development of performance measures. Performance measures are most likely to be applicable or identified as best practice or recommended with others as are identified as potentially useful as either a supplemental measure or for screening purposes. They are categorized as measures of effectiveness through mobility, level of service, accessibility, safety, other multimodal performance measures, and infrastructure. This slide highlights performance measures can include accessibility, safety, and other multimodal performance measures. Infrastructure efficiency performance measures are also measurable.
Hey, Gary, I'm going to pause you there to switch the interpreters.
Okay.
And Daniel Weaver has his hand raised.
I don't know when it's appropriate to talk about and fit this into it, but one of the elements that I didn't hear anything about it that passing is that Clark County is one of the few counties in the country, but certainly in Washington that has a 33-mile railroad that currently carries 800 cars a year up the line from the junction of Burlington Northern up to either the Rye Junction just south of 78th Street or to another transloading operation just south of Andreessen, and then another one just north of Andreessen, and then all the way to Brush Prairie. There's another one in Battleground. Those cars, 800 cars of material is transported up that line that if that line was not there would require a very large number of trucks traveling up that same corridor to deliver those things. And that's not talked about anywhere in here yet that I've seen, and I don't know where it's appropriate to put that in.
Well, thank you, Mr. Weaver, for mentioning that. Well, I didn't want to inundate everyone with the freight facts, so I apologize for glossing over them when we looked at the freight map earlier.
Well, and let me just tell you that if there's some legal action going on between the operator and the county right now, but when that gets resolved, that freight number is going to increase substantially. And that, it eliminates truckloads of goods going across the highways and being traveled all the way up the line. It could go all the way up to Chilachi Prairie. At any rate.
No, that's a great point, because as far as performance measures go, we've got first and last mile connections that we've looked at before in previous months, where we're looking at the connections that need to occur to be improved for moving goods and services and people. So it basically makes the first last mile connections more of a complete streets, and a lot of those are in the rural areas, and that's okay. It's good for the system, and we don't have any performance measures that we can use to look at any of these first last mile connections. So right now, the measures that we have are measuring vehicle traffic. We don't have anything specific just for freight or any other kind of movements.
David Poland, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I thank Daniel for adding that, because it does give an important perspective when we're discussing about in the future how many vehicles are going to be on the road, including how we're going to make sure the highways and the off streets have enough sturdy streets for all the trucks, which we assume are going to increase in numbers. At the same time, if we increase the number of cars on the railroad and we include that in our thinking, then maybe there won't be as many trucks added to the street as we are assuming because of that change. So I thank you a lot for bringing that perspective. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt again. I'm still stuck on this pilot thing. Is there any other states that do that? That I'm just
the
curious
road
because like
usage
I
tax.
DoorDash and stuff, how's that gonna affect me and stuff, you know, if it's a pay by the mile? I'm just curious if there's anything I can look at besides Washington does.
I'll go back in the slide. I've got links in here.
And we can send those links to you directly.
So it's in the
Okay.
PowerPoint presentation. So if you go to our webpage and you click on this link,
Well, I've got PowerPoint. I'm just wondering which what page it was or where it was. I must have missed it. I have
Hey,
the
we
number
can-
34.
We'll send
Page
you
34.
direct links after this
Okay.
meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
there's a whole. There are other states that have enacted programs.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So click the link inside the PowerPoint presentation. Let's see if I can get back.
I got
Hey,
hard copies. Why did I
Okay.
do that? Thank you. I got it.
welcome. We're getting there. Here we are. All right, so based on Washington state laws, the 6 transportation goals, the Department of Transportation created performance measures for mobility and economic vitality. At the local level, we have the flexibility to use land use categories, the 3 land use categories that implement the mobility performance framework. That's rural, town, urban, and urban core. Now, I'll briefly go over the definitions of each of those. The rural, based on Washington Department of Transportation's definitions, the rural category ranges from no development to some light development with sparse residential and other structures, mostly associated with farms. The land is primarily used for outdoor recreation, agricultural and/or resource extraction. Occasionally, non-incorporated communities will include a few residential commercial structures. And then for the town urban, locations are high density, consisting principally of multi-story and low to rise to medium rise structures for residential commercial use. Areas usually exist for light and sometimes heavy industrial use. Many structures accommodate mixed uses, commercial, residential, and parking. Urban areas usually include prominent destinations with specialized structures for entertainment, athletic, and social events, as well as conference centers, and a state route may serve as a main street. And the urban core, that is primarily a city. So we're not going to look at that and talk about that definition because that would not be in our jurisdiction. So that would be the city of Vancouver would be the urban core basically. And the downtown area of the city of Battleground and the city of Camas, Washougal, and Ridgefield, those are urban cores.
Can't leave out La Center. La Center's in there too.
Yeah, and the city of La Center, I can't forget that. Well,
Well, town goes to La Center. County does.
the county does.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The county. The whole county goes there at some point.
Yeah. So Washington State Departments of Transportation's performance measures have an expanded functional classification that I thought was really interesting. So they look at potential roadway types combinations. So there's a context on the top going across from right to left, the rural, center, and urban. And the roadway are on the bottom, the principal arterial, the minor arterial, the collector, and the local. So so there's a legend there. On the left is low, the highlighted. is really light, and then the medium is a darker color, and then the high is the darker colors of the people, of the bikes, and the vehicles. So in this example of a principal arterial in the urban area, the dominant context would be high usage for vehicles, bikes, and people walking. It almost looks like the bicycle is chasing after the bicyclist, but that's not the case.
Hey, I wanted to say something. I don't know about La Center though exactly, but do you know if they're ever going to put, I've noticed recently from being out towards the casino that there's been numerous, almost every time that I leave there, there's somebody walking on the side of the freeway. You guys been aware of that at all? Like between there and the rest area? Because they get left at the casino and stuff like that. I'm just saying that might be something. I mean, is that number one hotspot in Clark County?
Yeah, well, I believe technically, I think people are allowed to walk on I-5 up there. So, Linda, do you remember where the stop?
I don't.
It's, because I know there's certain, you're not allowed to walk on parts of I-5 inside the city of Vancouver, and then there's a line that merges. I can't remember where.
It's not so much walking; it's cycling is allowed on parts of I-5. I don't think pedestrians are allowed on I-5 at all.
Well, there you have it. I'm wrong, so I apologize, people.
Mm-hmm. And cycling is only allowed on certain segments of I-5 outside of the immediate urban area.
And between Camas and 192nd, there's a lot of walkers, and walkers, not bike riders, walkers.
I want to highlight in this classification system that the State Department of Transportation is using, there's no distinction between minor and major collectors. So for Clark County, we've got 2 rural collector classifications, a major and a minor collector, and both the collectors share the same 60-foot right-of-way and the 40-foot roadway width. And then we've got 3 urban collector types. A 2-lane collector with a center lane turn and bike lanes, 2-lane collector with bike lanes, and then a 2-lane collector. The 2-lane collector allows parking, and the other 2 do not allow parking. So state law authorizes comprehensive plans, transportation elements to develop multimodal transportation improvement strategies. The following slides will cover performance measures for multimodal accessibility and quality of service. So I have links inside the PowerPoints. You can't see the hand. So on the bottom right of the slide, performance measure links, multimodal accessibility, quality of service. So if you click on the link, you'll see more explanation of how these performance measures work. So I just put the link there for your knowledge and information. This slide shows multimodal accessibility performance measures. The table shows performance metrics and the appropriate context. For example, major destinations performance metric for urban areas is access to non-work destinations by driving, transit, biking, and walking. This is access scored non-work. Accessibility performance measures are in this slide. For quality of service, in this example for pedestrian quality of service, we have level of pedestrian stress as a performance metric in urban and rural centers. Predictability performance measures, travel reliability. For the travel reliability category of modal reliability, we have travel time reliability as a metric in urban and rural centers. For pedestrians, we would have reliable metric for crossing a street at a signalized intersection. We have efficiency performance measures also in the example from the State Department of Transportation. In the mode share category, the table shows percent shares by mode as a metric in urban and rural centers. By measuring accessibility, Clark County can identify multimodal problems and opportunities for improvement, including those unrelated to the speed of vehicles, the gaps in the multimodal network that hamper economic growth. We can use engagement with stakeholders to help identify strategies that support, prioritize modes, promoting demand management and transit-friendly roadway treatments along corridors with high transit usage. To predict outcomes, track performance, and weigh multimodal trade-offs. Widening roadways may improve accessibility for people traveling in cars to regional destinations, but it may also reduce accessibility for vulnerable populations trying to cross local destinations. I just want to remind everyone there are no one-size-fits-all performance measures that can address all of the policies or objectives of a plan or a project. Many performance measures address only one dimension of a problem while ignoring other important considerations. We've discussed several meaningful options for transportation measures that we can include in our transportation system plan.
I think that's an important point that Gary made, is the reason why we're talking about these performance measures with the regional transportation lens is because that's really what determines what is failing, and that's determining where we're doing good. So by really taking a look holistically at our performance measures, we can address the regional system as a whole rather than just on one matrix alone. Michael, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I had a question related somewhat to performance measures. Has there been any thought or studies anywhere that you have seen related to the impact of the last 2 or 3 years on what potentially could happen with transportation in the future? I know the questions come up on some of my projects, in private development, but it seems like something that might actually need to be started to add into these plans now, as opposed to, in 10 years, oh, look what happened because of these 2 years. Have you guys seen anything coming, as far as data goes on that?
Go ahead, Carrie.
The amount of cars that went up.
Yes, we have. So starting from the federal government, there are performance measures required. So it's a matter of lining our policies and our development standards in line with performance measures. So that's what we're trying to do is set ourselves up in the future so we can more easily go after some of these grants that have opportunities available for multimodal options. Linda?
And I had a comment. Metro is currently doing a study about the future of transportation, and they're looking at the impacts of the COVID had on transportation and what might be the ongoing future. So Elliott Rose Metro is spearheading that study, so we should be seeing the results of it in the next 6 months or so.
And I think as far as the technology sector goes too, we're continuing to expand the connected vehicles, the infrastructure, being able to talk to and get information from connected cars so that the transportation system can be operated as efficiently as possible. And that continues to evolve. What that will look like 10 years from now, I don't know. We're trying to look at it in the future, but a lot of that's more of a crystal ball than it is a good analysis.
Right. Thank you.
So the following slides, we will discuss the regional financing.
Gary, I'm gonna pause for the interpreter switch.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think you're good.
All right. The Washington State Department of Transportation has identified significant state projects that have legislative funding. I believe this map, you click on this map, it'll highlight the projects specifically that are located in Clark County. You can see them in the map. They're red dots, green dots down around SR 14 on the bottom. There's a I-205 project right where I-5 and I-205 meet. So they're there. I don't want to click on the link because it'll take me into a rabbit hole. We don't want to go there, but it's there and available for you. The Washington Department of Transportation administers many transportation-related grants that are available to local agencies. However, most of these programs are dependent on the legislator allocating funding and can vary from year to year. As the MPO for the region, RTC selects and prioritizes projects into a 4-year program of regionally significant transportation projects. Local funding sources are not administered through state or federal agencies. These funds are generated through taxes, private contributions, and other methods. So financing our Clark County Transportation project begins with Clark County Comprehensive Growth Management Plan. It's a 20-year capital facility plan. The state does not require funding for this plan. I told you I'd get back to this comment, the 20-year capital facility plan. So here we are. The 6-year Transportation Improvement Program is the county's regional multi-year financing plan. Projects from the 20-year plan are scored and fully funded in the 6-year plan. The adopted annual construction plan constructs the 6-year transportation improvement projects. The local dollars are stretched and maximized by creating performance measures that align with the state's performance measures. The benefits of performance measures are likely to occur additional local funds that would allow more investment opportunities and system improvements. And back to our January's questions, the 4 questions. Let's think about what we've heard and answer the following questions. Are we ready? Should we get up and stretch for a second and put our thinking caps on? All right, number 1. Based on what we've seen, are we fulfilling the countywide planning policies to coordinate among jurisdictions?
The thumbs up. There's Michael.
I can't honestly say this yet. Sorry.
Generally speaking, on a larger sense, I think, we are and using RTC and all those sorts of things and looking at overall goals. But I think when it gets down to some of the finer details is where some of the disconnects start to happen. And that kind of flows into number 3. So we could talk a little bit more about that later. But I think as an overall, yes, the county is doing a good job coordinating among jurisdictions.
Any other comments on question 1?
That's one. I know, how many committee members do we have?
9.
Ideally, I'd like to hear from everybody. David?
I concur with what he just said. Overall, it sounds like that by having multiple different ways, as Matt had said, to look at things and not just focus on one area, we are in general doing a good job there at the planning, because you're looking at airplanes, you're looking at pedestrians, you're looking at cars. But like you said, little nitpicky things like we're not able to look at certain things. We don't have the data collected on certain things. We are missing some of the information, like with the future of train transportation. And like you said before, in the past, we had not been able to intersections track pedestrians walking across. So there's some little minute things they're missing, but in general, I think you're doing a good job.
Thank you. Jay, you have your hand up?
So I guess I look at it a little differently in that we do have the regional groups looking at their region, but we don't have, we're in a unique geographic situation where we bridge across the river. And we can use the I-5 bridge, and I know it's federal and all that great stuff, but there's not an oversight of coordination on both sides of the river, looking at the same thing. I mean, that's why we have to have these different groups meet to talk about river crossings and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, we'd have to have that anyway, but it just, I don't know that we've got somebody looking at us from the Multnomah Clark County view, if you will.
PDX. Because I think that too. We have horrible public transportation here, but across the bridge, wow. You can get around on public transportation. Here, not so much sometimes.
They're not necessarily connected. I mean, C-Tran's a great point, but I'm not sure you can do that either. I mean, each state has its different priorities, and so I'm not sure how to do that, to be honest with you.
That's hard with us in Clark County.
Jay, so from what I've seen, Metro has a 2040 plan. Their plan, they do not show any connections into Clark County, other than what's already on the books, I-205, I-5. They do not show any new bridge crossings.
So
nobody's looking at the options of those.
Well, the county council has directed us, Clark County Public Works staff, transportation planning staff, to look into that. So that's an upcoming topic that we'll explore with the county council.
Okay. I'm just saying that was kind of an example of the two regions, again, they have their own priorities, but then somehow you got to connect the two because we are interconnected. I mean, there's just no two ways around that.
I fully agree with you, sir. We are connected.
So the other thing in other regions across the U.S., especially on the East Coast, there's transportation jurisdictions, transportation authorities that cover multiple transportation systems. However, a lot of those times, those transportation authorities are associated with private tolled roads. And so there's some give and take with that.
Sure.
Who owns the property on the side of the freeways? I'm just wondering. Is that Department of Transportation, or the?
So that's a pretty general question. There's a lot of properties on the side of the freeways. As far as the right of way, that is controlled by the Department of Transportation in both states.
Generally speaking, if you drive up the road on I-5, it's the land is owned by the state. That's right adjacent to the street.
Yeah, I'm wondering, because on both sides and actually all over the West Coast, basically, that's where people are able to put up tents. I'm just wondering I've heard that it was Department of Transportation that owned that. I just was wondering, you guys would probably know, that's why.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to move on to number 2. Should Clark County revise the street classification system to improve mobility for the 3 user groups, the pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles?
I think yes.
Thank you. 1. Michael, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. So with the assumption that we're talking about arterial, minor arterial, local, no, I don't think those should be revised, since those are, pretty wide-ranging, used through all jurisdictions. If Clark County all of a sudden decided to go to something different, it could get a little wonky. If we talk about, specific street sections for arterials, for minor arterials, local streets, those sorts of things, then yes, I do think Clark County should take a look at improving the standard street sections for different classified streets as it relates to the other user groups. And that'll also kind of tie into number 3.
Thank you. Linda, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to comment. I don't think street classification should be changed because they're really related to like the federal functional classification system. It's the design of the streets that perhaps needs to change to make sure that pedestrians and cyclists are accommodated.
I was thinking when I was reading it was like, have you guys been up? Well, of course you have, up on 39th and like by 39th AM PM over in the Lincoln area over there? Like, you know how their bike lanes are different color? You know what I'm saying? So you can see like more than just, it's different over there. I don't know if it was blue and green or what it is, but it's very much more visible. And I feel it's a lot, I don't know. Just that area though, that's what I thought about when you asked that question, was changing something like that. But I guess I gotta.
Great.
Shall we move on to the next one? All right. Number 3, are there obvious differences in the transportation infrastructure between different jurisdictions in Clark County?
So the intent of this is really, as we're trying to develop a transportation system where you don't know which jurisdiction you're in. You can easily go from point A to point B and your route doesn't change depending on you crossing a border. So that's really what this question is trying to get at. Michael, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I do believe there's some pretty obvious differences between jurisdictions. And it's kind of some of the stuff I was talking about, like in number 2, and what Linda was talking about, changing the standard cross sections or the road design, the roadway system design. So for example, a lot of the city jurisdictions require detached sidewalks, street trees, street lights. Clark County doesn't tend to require those things on their roadway system. So you could be going from a lit section of roadway to an unlit section of roadway, in the same section, the same 100-foot section. And the difference would be that you cross into Clark County jurisdiction at that point. And then when cities like Vancouver annex sections of the county into their boundaries, then the city has roadway systems that don't line up among themselves. And so I think that's where some of the big differences I was talking about in the first 2 come into play.
Yeah. Totally agree with that.
Thank you.
Well, if you want to look at the future, if cars keep getting stolen the way that they are and at the rate that they are and things aren't being done, eventually nobody's going to have cars, because once they tow that car, if it's not already blown up or ruined or destroyed by the person that stole it, then it costs so much to get it out of impound that it's not even worth it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a big thing. Every night, cars are stolen everywhere.
Oh, that makes sense.
David?
David, you got your hand up?
Can you hear my voice okay?
Yep.
Okay. I have to agree what had been said about as a pedestrian, well, I'll be walking, and I notice in the city of Vancouver, for example, plenty of lights everywhere I walk, with very few exceptions. I can see where I'm stepping. There might be some areas where that's not true, but most of the time where I'm going, I can see myself pretty well. However, where I live, and when I'm walking down 78 and some other places, like going from Chuck's Produce up the hill, no sidewalks, no lights, only on one side of the street is a sidewalk. It makes it very scary that I'm going to get hit. And I wear a reflective jacket wherever I go. Probably everyone in the town knows me because I do that so I don't die at night. And you know, it gets dark around 5 o'clock this time of year. And so the problem is that it's clearly not the same. I don't usually go to a lot of other cities because I'm pedestrian, but sometimes I'll ride with one of my friends or somebody someplace. So I went to the Ridgefield area and I'm like, wow, this sure looked different here in Ridgefield. And all the streets were different. However, everything was lined up was different. I went to Battleground. I'm like, it is definitely a city now, but you could tell the difference between Battleground getting to Brush Prairie when I was walking down the street to get to the other bus place, and no way, no sidewalks and no lights. And it was a little scary again. And I had to do that when I was working for the federal census. I had to go to these areas and I'm like, ugh, this is a scary place for me to walk, but I'm required. I have to do this. And where I had to cross the street, there was no place for me to cross, you know, no like little light things like we have at Clark College, or now on Highway 99, where I can walk across by Fred Meyer's, which is wonderful. So these things are missing in different areas that we need to have them. Let's see, there was one other example, if I can think of it really quick for you so I don't waste your time. Where was it I went? Oh, when I was in a car with somebody, and I was learning, getting my driver's license, and I had to go up north from here. And it wasn't quite to Salmon Creek, but we went a little north, a little west, and we had to go through a roundabout. And I had never been in that area before, or it wasn't that developed when I was last there with my grandmother. And I'm looking at that and thinking, that roundabout's nothing like the one that I had seen in downtown Vancouver. It was completely different. And then I talked to the driving instructor, who used to be a police officer, and he said, yeah, it is different. And so there's all these differences. Diversity. Difference is okay, but if the goal is uniformity, it's definitely not uniform. Is that a bad thing? If you want to be all the same, it's not. Is it a bad thing? That it depends. We need to have lights, we need to have sidewalks, yes, but is the roundabouts thing being different every place? Is that going to confuse people? That's the question.
That's always been a thing. I think that they should have like ads, little things that pop up on your YouTube and stuff about how to, because you can't take everybody back to, driving school. Everybody's not going to want to go back and learn how to go to the Department of Licensing and do that again to learn roundabouts. But I think that they should do something like that. Throw those, commercials up, teaching out people how to do roundabouts.
Good comments.
Yep.
Any additional thoughts on question number 3? It's good insight. Know that the infrastructure is completely different when it comes to pedestrians, and that safety needs to be paramount when we're trying to define uniform systems so that it is a safe environment for all users.
Matt, if I could say something real quick, this is Mike Salas. One of the words that we kind of use in the situations where we're looking at ways to inform the public from a pedestrian or a vehicle standpoint as wayfinding. So this might be something that fits under wayfinding as they're talking about ways to move pedestrians from one place to another, where we may be able to look at it from that perspective.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, good point. Okay, I'm going to switch interpreters for last question.
The last question, number 4. Should the level of service standards be consistent between jurisdictions in all of Clark County?
Michael?
I think they need to be as close as possible. I've had a few projects recently on city jurisdictional boundaries with the county, and it mostly relates to traffic stuff, so I'm not an expert in any of them, but essentially there could be cases where an intersection is in Clark County, but only a block away from, Camus's boundary or Vancouver's boundary. And the intersection would be failing in Clark County, but if you brought it into, Camus's boundary or something, it's no longer a failing intersection. So, I'm not sure how close those standards currently are, but I have seen a few cases where there's some conflict between jurisdictional requirements for a failing and a passing intersection, and that can cause some impact pretty heavily to traffic stuff, at those boundaries.
Thank you, Michael.
David? Go ahead.
Can you hear my voice okay?
Yep.
Perfect. So I'd like to give you an example about 2 intersections in Clark County that one is in the county and one that is in the city of Vancouver. That are the 2 most dangerous ones in the county, according to a lawyer that I talked to when I was hit by a car and I nearly died. And the place that I almost died was at this intersection of 99th and Highway 99 by the Baja Fresh. And that is just barely legal. It is where you cross to go west on the northern side of the intersection, Baja Fresh going across. That area right there is 8 feet exactly from the edge where the dip is for a wheelchair to go across. The problem is you have all these great big metal poles in the way. And so the person that was driving and turning couldn't see me. I'm not the first person that has almost been hit there. And until a person dies, they usually don't change that. So it's a pretty scary place, especially if it's like 4:30 and the sun is starting to set behind the highway and it gets in people's eyes as they're turning. So I was told legally it fits the criteria for the state and the county for that intersection where things are located, but it's not safe. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it should be. The other place that is the most dangerous intersection, of course, I know that since then they have been working on it, and maybe it isn't anymore, but it's still scary, is of course the one on Chekhov Drive in Mill Plain in the city. That's the one that I crossed to go to Evergreen Memorial Gardens where my grandparents are buried. And I want to appreciate that the mayor of the city of Vancouver listened to me, and so did another gentleman. I'm sorry, I can't remember what his name is. And finally, we got both sides of it, that street further down, to be paved, because originally there was only one side that was paved there in the city. So when you look at those intersections like that, where it's very scary, some of the rules that are saying this is appropriate because somebody said it's appropriate, pedestrian wise, it is not appropriate. And I wish they would have people like me that are pedestrians to work with them on changing that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Chief Chester. Oh, go ahead, Gary.
I didn't mean to butt in. So, David, the Baja Fresh is on 78th Street, Highway 99. Is that what you were talking about? So I thought I heard you say 99th Street, and okay, because this is being recorded. I just didn't want to confuse people in the future.
Burgerville's 99th.
I'm sorry, 78.
Okay, thank you.
99th and 99th, though, you can't.
Correcting me.
There's a double yellow line both ways on there.
Jay Chester, you're next.
I agree. They should be the same standards. If you look at like 137th Avenue going north, you can see that's a major thoroughfare in transition going from the multiple lanes and roundabouts out to a rural road just south of 4th Plane. In that, growth drives the improvements going out in that direction, and you annex the area. Now you've got a lot of homes out there already. Their traffic builds up. So at least if you could do the right of way and the street sections consistently between the rural and urban areas, that would be, at least a good step in the direction, because now the city's buying right of way that's expensive because it's been priced as residential, and it just cascades on and on. So yes, there should be consistent standards between city, county jurisdictions.
Great, thank you. Linda?
My answer to question 4, yes, it would be desirable, I think, to have consistent level of service standards between jurisdictions. However, you might want to continue to have difference between rural and urban level of service standards, because after all, in the Initial Growth Management Act, they were trying to encourage people to live in urban areas. So the level of service standards differed between the rural and the urban. But then as Jay just commented, we have issues in Clark County because we're growing so quickly that a lot of the rural areas become urban all too soon.
This is Amy. I was gonna say, being a person that's went over that I-5 bridge, and regardless of how many cars and stuff and the traffic that's going, there are people walk and they use the bike, and a lot of more people would use. So I bet bikes are going across that bridge, I-5, instead of the whole big picture of a big bridge. Why don't they look into doing a kind of like on Falk Road right there above the SR 500, like a little walk bridge? Like, it's scary to ride a bike. I don't know if you guys rode a bike over I-5 bridge, but it's scary. You almost, if you go one slightly the wrong way, your bike tire is going to slip, and which will cause you to not fall into the water, but you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to fall. Your bike tire might break or pop. Yeah, it's dangerous. That really needs to be. If we did that, there would be so much, especially, with all the people that don't have cars because they are homeless or they are low income.
I know this. The bridge replacement program is aware of the current situation of how bicycles feel about riding over the interstate bridge. I've ridden my bike over it several times. I've attended some of the meetings. I've provided input myself about the connections and the need for better improvements. So they're aware of it. It's in the works.
Okay, good.
Linda, I want to go back to one of the slides that I struggle with. So this slide here, so I hear what you're saying. It's best to leave the street classifications alone, because then there are federal classifications tied together with this. But the way the state has it laid out, it's easy to see that the rural roads are principally designed for vehicles, and you get into urban area, it's more of a mix. And right now our classifications, it's not really that clear to me. It's not as black and white as this is. So I think that goes back to looking at the standard details and trying to figure out a better way to implement the classification, so there's more of a distinction of what you see when you think of a rural road. It's when we talk about a complete street for a rural road, it's basically designed for a car, and that's the intended user. When we say complete street, it's like, well, it's a complete street for the user. So it's a struggle that I have, and I'm glad I've got input from this committee on that. David, you're smiling.
Yes. Because I don't know.
Uh-oh.
And DC, I lived in Washington, DC. It's if the people there in Congress that have been involved in it, they may not have had input from people from Clark County. Our county is not the same as the counties in Maryland, you know, and so I think we can look at this as and say this is the law, and that this is a good guideline, a generalization. But if we were to change these cars, bicycles, and pedestrians to demographics of people and say white, black, and Latino, it's not going to be the same in every county. It's not going to be the same in every state. So generalization, this isn't too bad as a guideline, but I'm really glad that you guys are all willing to hear every perspective so that we can tailor it to our county's needs, especially as it grows and changes.
Exactly. Thank you. Linda, did you have any comments?
Well, again, I think we've got to be careful not to muddle classification with design. Probably we would be best served if we could decide on what our pedestrian system and what our bicycling system should be, because probably as a pedestrian you don't want to be walking on principal arterials because that carries the most vehicle traffic, so it's not the most desirable place to walk necessarily. Likewise with cycling, we probably need to determine what's the best, most effective cycling network that this county could try to develop. And it might be some of the collectors carry some of the cyclists in the most safe manner. But again, I don't want to mess around with these 4 classification types, because that sort of plays into the well, how much volume is a street carrying compared with what access does it provide to services, and we got to have that balance.
Right. It's so simple when I'm reading the DOT's thoughts on context sensitive solutions. You know, but you know, get down to the local level, that makes it a little more complicated. It's easy to put, you know, the 30,000 foot view of how this could look, but then you look at, you know, how it's going to fit in our community. It doesn't necessarily work. So this is good input. Thank you.
And I think one of the biggest challenges on a lot of this that's going to be faced, you know, now and into the future is interpretations of all these things that get put in place. Because just like the conversation the two of you just had, there's slightly differing views on exactly what you're looking at. Neither is necessarily wrong or necessarily right. There's somewhere in the middle that'll work in different situations, but that interpretation is going to change based on who elected officials are, who the review staff for development projects are, you know, all those sorts of things over the 5, 10, 20, 50-year range. You know, that's the hard part, is dealing with those interpretations that are going to be changing, and how can we have something written that can kind of account for potential different interpretations or allow for some flexibility to meet those localized differences that we need to meet. And, you know, you see a lot of problems in some of the smaller jurisdictions codes that didn't really ever try to account for that, and can end up making a mess real quick if you don't try to account for different interpretations and, guess at that crystal ball as best as you can now.
Right. That's when we look at the at Washington State Transportation Plan, the 2040 plan. So they offer practical solutions for us to look at with performance measures, and that's where a lot of these ideas came from. It's just a matter of trying to make everything look seamless from the top down to our local level. It gets really complicated really fast.
Yes, it does.
Did you say 2040?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, it's just around the corner nowadays.
I know. I haven't looked at it. That just seems like so far, but it's not, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the year 2000. Remember that? Just save your water.
Yeah.
Get your
Was gonna
cash
come
out.
doing it.
Yeah, 2040 is just around the corner now. It's like now we're planning for that. It's like, how do we get there? I think with what we've discussed today can help us with our transportation plan. Our system plan will help us at least align our policies and our code into a better position where we're more available for the future grants. So I have to, moving on in the presentation, here's my my obligatory road report concerns slide. So if you have any issues, David, help yourself. and everyone else, Daniel, Linda, Michael, any concerns, click on the link and it goes into a report to a road to Clark County. So I've actually clicked on the link and it goes to a person in Public Works and they will respond to you. So I verified that. I did a little test and they're like, what are you doing? What do you need? I'm like, just checking. Just want to see if the system works. So it does. I verified it. We're good. And then the speeding. So Clark County doesn't enforce any speeding laws. So contact the Clark County Sheriff's Office. You can call the hotline or click on the link there to report speeding. And then that's it for our presentation.
I don't know which one of these categories that would fall into, but our last meeting, I was talking about this road, my road that I live on. Who would you talk to about maybe if this is a no parking, getting no parking signs up here? Because I've watched consistently since then 4 other times them tow 3 other cars in that day. So it's like there's no parking sign.
Are you in the city of Vancouver?
Yes, I'm on Nicholson Road.
Oh, well, you'd call the city of Vancouver police.
No, I don't want to call them. They keep coming and towing the cars.
Oh, well, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Amy, I'll do some research and get you contact information at the city of Vancouver.
Super. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you all.
That's it for the meeting. So next month we'll have our environmental discussion, and we're almost done with our sounding board. So thank you for your time. I appreciate all of your input this evening, and I hope you have enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Before we leave, just real quick.